Hello everybody and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar Sleeve, support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys.
Ruben Bressler.
Hey, what's going on?
We're back. We're here.
Yeah.
It's time to talk about some white cards in Arena. That will be very exciting. It's been a minute since we got back here.
Yeah, it's nice to revisit old ideas. We talked about the best white cards maybe ever, but now that Arena seems to be the primary way most people are playing Magic these days, partially because it's the premier program, partially because it was not safe to go outside for a long time, a lot of different reasons, but not every white card is on Arena, and so having access to talk about the list again is nice, and for the first time ever for Nerd Girl.
Absolutely. Get that train rolling. Well, of course, we have to start with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 confusing cards. Ruben?
I would say that we were bombarded with confusing cards to choose from. We had a plethora of obfuscated words to be able to decipher. And we were also sort of scud missiled on multiple platforms by one person who wanted to make sure that their voice was heard. And you know what? It has been a while since the Maverick Girl has won one of these.
Hey.
So I'm super excited that she is the winner this week. Of all of the confusing, mind-numbing cards that could have been included here, it boggles my mind to not see Ice Cauldron on anyone's list, particularly Evan's. Ice Cauldron was the poster child for confusing text boxes back in the day, clocking in at a mighty 99 words in its text box, and the Oracle text barely does anything to alleviate this at 83 words. Once you understand what's happening on the card, it becomes easy to grok, but trying to get to the point of understanding what's happening beneath all of this task is nothing short of a chore in and of itself. I'd also like to give two shout-outs to two unnecessarily confusing white commons from Legends that I'd prepared, as I absolutely thought somebody had to have Ice Cauldron on there, Wall of Caltrops, and Remove Enchantments, two of simply the most baffling and overly complicated cards I've ever read in my life.
Wow, that's a whole lot. Well, For those who don't know, Ice Cauldron, I won't read the Ice Age version because it's bad and there's 99 words on it. That's a lot of words. But I'll read you the current version of it, the current Oracle text. For 4 generic mana, it is an artifact that says X generic mana tap : You may exile a non-land card from your hand. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. You put a charge counter on Ice Cauldron and note the type and amount of mana spent to pay this activation cost. Activate only if there are no charge counters on it. And tap, remove a charge counter from it. Add Ice Cauldron's last noted type and amount of mana. Spend this mana only to cast the last card exiled with Ice Cauldron. This is stupid and horrible and terrible, and there's no doubt about it that this is like a million words for not a good reason. The only issue ultimately was that one of those things that, like, when you solve the puzzle, it's like it's bad, it's dumb, it's terrible. Like, it's so you're putting mana sort of on, I don't know, layaway, and it's like, okay, you're putting stuff on layaway and that's fine, but that's kind of all you're doing.
It's pretty bad. There's a legend from Strixhaven that does this. Kind of. The one that lets you put like time counters on it, and then 3 turns later you can pay 4 less or whatever. But again, this is another one of these cards that it makes kind of makes sense. You put it in the cauldron, you let it steep there for a little while, and it makes it easier to cast. It does not work in English. It does not translate to functionality.
Yeah, this is not a card that, I don't see being reprinted. It's $2.50+ because no one's going to hope that this is the next secret layer or something. Yeah. Or if they're doing like a April Fool's, joke, I could see this being reprinted. That'd be kind of funny. But yeah, ultimately my issue with this, the reason it wasn't on the list wasn't because it wasn't confusing, because it clearly is, but at the same time, it's like when you solve the puzzle, always drink your Ovaltine. And you're like, What?
The payoff is not great.
Yeah, the payoff's not great. And so that is what that is. But that said, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Of course, the Maverick Girl knows how to contact us on social media, on the Discords, on the Twitches, whenever. You're always there. It's cool. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate, because it is time to talk about our favorite white cards on Arena. I ain't gonna, because my number 10's higher. It's my only higher on my list, so I can't get started like Ruben can with our number 10.
Hi there, everyone. Didn't see you there. Here are my favorite white cards that are on Arena. Maybe not favorite, but certainly most powerful. And I'll start with one that is only on Arena because it's in the Strixhaven Mythical Archive or Mystical Archive. But it's a Modern Horizons powerhouse. It sees a ton of play in Modern. My number 10 is Ephemerate.
Nice.
Okay. Ephemerate is a white instant for 1 white mana. It says exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, and it has rebound, which means you cast this spell from your hand. When you cast the spell from your hand, exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost.
Yeah, this card is absolutely terrific, and one of those cards that, it doesn't look, I think, as powerful as always, as it kind of can be, but it scales really well. It's amazing as your creatures get bigger, where their effects get bigger, and as Wizards keeps just making enter the battlefield effects, this thing just keeps getting better and better as a result. So,
nice.
Yeah. It's particularly good with the new evoke elementals.
Oh yeah, in Modern, yeah,
like
that's crazy.
Grief and Solitude. It sees a lot of play in like the 4-color Omnath decks. It's a very good card.
We're not talking about Modern, Evan. Get out of here.
That's right.
I mean, they have cards that are very powerful that I don't necessarily want to play against in Arena, because that scares me, and that's unfortunate. So, Nerd Girl, what's your number 10?
So, I just want to point out that you guys always switched up. So now you guys, every time so far today, you have referenced top 10 or so favorite white cards.
Yeah, I didn't know that this was a favorite list.
We were supposed to just do the best 10
I didn't say
white
that.
cards.
I said top 10, whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
Mine's favorite. We can go on.
Yours is favorite. Mine is best. Sounds
Mine
like Nerd
is also
Girls
best,
is also best.
Ish. So I did kind of a cross because I couldn't quite decide, because there are some all-stars in Standard and they don't kind of find a home. So I have this kind of mesh list of things that were very impactful for whatever they do. Some are not relevant now. But this first one actually is. It's something that is kind of a pet deck to people. I don't really like it too much, but it is very popular. I hear a lot about this. So I gave it the honorary number 10 spot, and that is 9 lives.
Ooh.
This is an enchantment for white, colorless. It is a hexproof enchantment. If a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage, and put an incarnation counter on 9 lives. When 9 lives gets 9 counters on it, exile it, and when it leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. So this is a card that you can basically prevent yourself from dying, similar to the Book Haven combo we're seeing now in Standard. And the way you do that is with a card called Solemnity, which makes it so you can't put counters on your enchantments. So you cannot lose the game to any creature-based deck. You just go forever and they can't kill you. You can still lose life to things like Cauldron Familiars, anything that has a loss of life situation, or someone could just maybe have a Cleansing Nova that gets you. But it is a pretty fun thing. I think a lot of people tend to use this a bunch. So this made the honorary 10 slot.
Yeah, this card's great. It's silly. It's but it has cats on it, and everybody loves cats, so it doesn't really matter. And its ability is really super unique, and I like the idea of having cool lock combos like that, but they're not 100%. You can still lose life. And if we just have I would be happy with a good old-fashioned Tranquility reprint to just destroy all the enchantments would be cool, but I'll take a Cleansing Nova in the meantime. You lose.
This card's hilarious, and the art is incredible. The artist, I believe, was selling prints of this that feature your cat if you sent in a photo.
Oh my god.
If I recall correctly. Yeah, this card's amazing. I've never cast it. I never will. But I love that it exists.
No, I saved up the wild cards so I can play this deck, and when it works, 60% of the time works every time. So
it's like a hug from Cat Jesus.
Oh yes, it is, and your opponent can see it coming, like they know, and you're just like, and they go, okay.
It's good tech against Vorinclex.
Oh, it's good tech against everything. Nice. Yeah, I'll say no. Yeah,
I do want to say that chat has pointed out I'm not this clever, but this should have been in the 9 spot. I'll never be that clever.
See, that's why Ruben kept telling me stuff like that for years. So like, you put so-and-so in that spot because of this, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No.
That's how I do tiebreakers of like, where do I put this? Well, this has the word 8 in it, so I'll put it here. This is it has 6 legs, so I'll put it at the 6.
Mm-hmm. I did not think about that at all. My brain does not work that way.
Me neither. I don't get it. But Ruben's like, why? You don't get it? I don't understand. No.
Yeah.
Moving on here to number 9. My number 9 is dope. My number 9 is one of my favorite new cards. They just added my favorite. Like this is like one of my first favorite, or one of my most recent favorite white cards to be made. Period. Wizards has gotten closer and closer to giving white card draw. They just won't. It's like back in the day, like when they made Harmonized, and everyone like, oh my god, green card draw, the world shall end. One day they'll likely give white, a divination or something, and everyone will lose their crap, because when you get to play with a card like Esper Sentinel, you really start to see A, how many non-creature spells people play, and B, how many cards you're going to draw off of it, because it's a lot. Thanks to Expressive Iteration and friends. Esper Sentinel is coming in from Modern Horizons 2, showed up thanks to Jumpstart Historic Horizons. 1 white mana for a 1/1 rare artifact creature human soldier. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. Can go well, obviously, in the Tempered Steel deck. But honestly, just as a 1 white mana tax, or 1 generic mana tax, it works great. Just fantastic. People don't like paying it.
Yeah. It doesn't need any help.
No.
The 1 is enough most of the time, because you play it on turn 1 and your opponent has a 1-drop or a 2-drop. They want to play their spell, so you're just going to get the free value. Much less if you're playing it in a Thalias Lieutenant deck where you can up the power, or any sort of artifact shenanigans where you can up the power, affinity or arc-bound shenanigans like that. But also just as a 1/1 for 1 that forces, either you pay the 1, Rhystic Study style, or you give me card advantage. In white is so huge.
White does not have access to a ton of card draw. It does kind of force your opponent to make this really weird decision at every point, and the decision sometimes changes. So you're either forcing people to play stuff off tempo, or like you said, get some really sweet card advantage.
And there is a play in Historic where Turnable Esper Sentinel turn to Luminarch Aspirant, make it a 2/2.
Ooh, I like that.
Things get spicy. Oh, is that a Mind Stone? I'll draw a card. Thanks. Right. It starts that engine going, and it's really, really fun. That card is absolutely sweet. One of the first ones I crafted when they made it on Historic Horizons, and I jumped on it. It's great. Ruben, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is a card that I've cast a ton and will continue to cast a ton, and so will everybody else. Because it's a 3-mana Wrath of God, everybody. I mean, Doomscar is my number 9. Mm-hmm. They haven't given us this before. 3 colorless white gets you a sorcery that says destroy all creatures, but it has Foretell of colorless white, which means during your turn, you can pay 2 generic and exile it from your hand and cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. They wouldn't give us 4-mana Wrath of Gods, much less 3-mana Wrath of Gods. Long time. And this really keeps a lot of strategies. I mean, if Alrund's Epiphany wasn't around, this would be keeping a lot of other strategies in check. But even this by itself is keeping a lot of strategies in check. Being able to wipe a board before you can go down into single digits is huge. And this card's so good.
Honestly, this card is part of the reason I feel like some of the Epiphany strategies are getting there. I mean, the red one, the red versions, they can Dragon's Breath, ramp into it a bunch. Yeah. Right. But the white, I've been playing a white-blue list that was submitted by a viewer, and I'm able to dig really deep. I'm able to consider to try to find this. And if I'm wrathing on 3 or 4, it buys me so much time for the Epiphany. I've been playing basically this no win con Azorius deck that just runs this one and the 4 white board clear. I'm running 8 board clears, and no creature can ever kill me. It's just not possible.
Yeah, that's the if it has 4 power or more, draw a card one. Or is that out of
it's the one that destroys all permanents, including like their enchantments and
stuff.
So
Reckoning or whatever. It's the white one.
It's
cheaper.
So that kills like the Rangers classes and stuff too, which is pretty sweet.
Oh yeah. This card just has all the right numbers. This is one of the best like pure designs I think to come from Kaldheim, because like it's numbers that are exciting, but it's numbers that are perfectly placed where you want them. You're ultimately paying 5 mana for it one way or another. It's just, do you pay 2 and 3 or do you pay 5? It's a great top deck because it's still a Wrath, but ultimately it's a way to use your mana in the early game in ways that the control deck just doesn't always have access to. So setting up your removal later it was just fantastic. And this is one of my favorite cards just in the whole set. I think it's terrific. Nerd Girl.
Agreed.
What's number 9?
So my number 9 is another historic card. This is, I like creature decks. So this is the kind of thing that I could see myself playing. And I do tend to play a lot of white decks. So we're going to go with Core Spirit Dancer.
Nice.
It is a colorless white for an 0/2. And it gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it. And whenever you cast an aura spell, you may draw a card. This is kind of the centerpiece in the aura deck for historic. It does have a lot of like non-games because you either end up with like all creatures and no auras, or all auras, no creatures. So sometimes it's kind of swingy, but also sometimes you just have like a 15/15 Vigilant Lifelinker with 10 cards in hand on turn 3, and it's just great.
This card's just this card, kind of runs downhill really quickly. You have to recognize, do you run it out on turn 2 or do you wait on turn 3 so you can play another enchantment on it so it doesn't just get shocked or whatever. But yeah, this card's amazing.
And in the modern Bogles deck, you originally were playing things like Silhana Ledgewalker as your creatures 9 and 10. But ultimately people realize that if your first couple hexproof creatures get killed, what you really want is to draw a million cards. And that's what Core Spirit Dancer does, is, all right, you've got some value. Here's a Spirit Dancer, play a thing, draw a card, play a thing, draw a card, play a thing, draw a card, go. And that is great. That is, that's a strategy that has been tried and true in my Arcades the Strategist commander decks, plenty of tribal strategies over the years, and especially now with things like auras and the SRAM black-white auras deck. This card's very good. And
Wizards really pushing the Enchantress theme in green-white, so you can play that alongside it, which is great and powerful. I've played a ton with and against this card. I'm always very afraid of this card. This is one of those cards, like, if you don't have an answer in a couple turns, you're generally not winning that game. It's not going to happen. The snowball is too big and it runs you over. All right, so moving here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8, I'll give you what am I going to give you? I'll give you $1 if you can tell me what Chop Down does. You know what Chop Down does?
Is that a Lorwyn card?
Nope.
Morningtide? No? Okay.
Chop Down is my number 8 because it's the adventure side of Giant Killer. Giant Killer is a colorless, or it's not a colorless, a white mana for a human peasant that says pay a colorless and a white and tap it to tap target creature. But its adventure side is Chop Down, which is 2 generic and a white for an instant adventure that destroys target creature with power 4 or greater. This thing is exactly what you want in pretty much every kind of board stall situation of any kind. You take down a big thing in your white weenie deck, and then you keep something important tapped down later on when you're a little bit more flooded out. Not to mention the fact that it's a 1-drop, so you can go search for it with your Ranger Captain or your Ranger of Eos. It's cheap, so you can play it early. It's effective. I just love this card.
I know Stomp, but I don't think I could tell you the name of any of the adventure sides of any of the cards. I think that didn't even ring a bell.
I think I could name a couple of them.
Petty Theft was the Brazen Borrower one.
Petty Theft is the Brazen Borrower.
The Stomp, and there's Chop Down, and then...
I think that Venture Deeper was the Merfolk Secret Keeper half.
That sounds about right. What was the Love Struck Beast one?
Yeah, I don't know.
Love's First Kiss or something like that. But it's also, speaking of that, like Lovestruck Beast was a monster in this metagame, and this was the perfect way to offset that kind of creature. Super powerful for 3 mana, and you're like, that's great for my 3 mana. I'm going to kill it, and then I'm later going to have a 1 mana 1/2 that can top down all of your future Lovestruck Beasts, which was fantastic, and block your 1/1. Like there was a whole bunch of reasons that the numbers on this card I think worked out the way they did, and if it weren't for certain like just crazy aberrations of magic like Fires of Invention, it wouldn't have taken that long to see how cool this card really fit into that metagame.
So the standard playable adventure names are Heart's Desire.
Heart's Desire,
the Lovestruck Beast. Let's see here. Boulder Rush is Rimrock Knight's half.
Sounds right, yeah.
Usher to Safety is the Shepherd of the Flock.
Okay.
Cast Off. I remembered Cast Off from Realm Cloaked Giant because it had such a cool animation.
With the hands.
And then Swift End was the first half of Murderous Rider for a couple of the other
more
well-known adventure spells.
Yeah, adventures in general are just amazing.
Agreed. I just never really paid attention to their names, so I would have never known.
Because they're down in the corner. Why? It's like reading the subtitle to a book. I don't.
Yeah.
It's it's split spells. It's another split spell with a creature. Creature is the spell, and like I can't imagine them not going back to making more adventure cards in the future. Because again, this is the way to have 2 spells on 1 card. Everyone loves that type of stuff. It makes decks more interesting. It makes decisions more interesting. And ultimately, I think they did, beyond the just mistakes or whatever, I think adventures were a monstrous hit, and this was a good example of those. Yeah. All right, let's move on here to MTG Nerd Girls number 8. What you got?
So my number 8, changing things up. This is a card that is actually relevant in current standard and has been for a little while. I actually enjoy this card. I mean, I think white is probably going to be one of the colors I like the most while we do this whole set, because I do like to play a lot of white. So this is a card that makes me very excited, and that's the Elite Spellbinder. For 2 colorless and a white, we have a human cleric with flying. It's a 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as it is exiled, it costs 2 more to cast. So this is a card that's really helping white be relevant. In fact, it's one of, only one of 3 or 4 S tier decks currently in the standard metagame, and this is a big part of it. So the fact that white has a card that can get it a seat at the table is really exciting for me. This was one of the pro players featured cards, which is really cool. There's a lot going on with this card.
Yeah. I mean, it's Paulo Vitor. It was great. Like, this is, like, Streets of New Capenna is coming next year, and it's the Mafia Devil crime families, and it's been rumored that Ransom, and this is cards that's been on the test, prints, that Ransom will likely be a mechanic, that this is likely some form of it. For example, you look at their hand, you take 1, and they have to pay 2 generic mana to get it back in their hand, not just 2 more to play it, but 2 more to get it back. I don't know, that's me just pontificating, because Ransom sounded like the perfect type of mechanic for that type of set, and this is the first way to kind of, just trial balloon it. Just be like, look, this is a powerful card that makes your stuff cost more, and it works out. It's very good. I played a ton of it, and this is just one of the best white cards ever made at this point on. So they really pushed this thing.
Yeah, and it also is super effective against Foretell, because a lot of spells have specific effects when you foretell it.
Right.
So if you take your opponent's, Poison the Cup or Haunting Voyage, they don't get the extra bonus out of it. Much less, they don't get the discount from Aldrin's Epiphany or Doomscar.
So that you can't actually foretell, because you can only play it from there. You can't actually do the foretelling thing. So you're actually really messing those decks up, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even just attacks of 2 mana is enough. Like, we've played enough miscalculations to know how backbreaking 2 mana is.
Oh yeah.
So this card's amazing.
This is one of those cards that, like, they spoiled it or whatever on stream, and people were like, just 2? And I'm like, dude, 2 is incredible. Like,
it's crazy.
I'll choose Blood in the Snow and I will kill them while they just stare at it in exile. Like, that is terrific.
It's also got evasion. It's hand disruption in white, which we never see?
Yeah.
Question mark. It's a unicorn amongst white cards in that it's evasive. It's a clock in and of itself. It's cheap. It is a tax effect. It does all the things.
Honestly, even if you think 2 is not very much, which it is, but even if you're on that boat, like the idea that you know what's in their hand when you're in that aggressive mono white deck, you're like, okay, slow it down, hold something back, or they don't have a blood on the snow, go in,
right.
Dump it all onto the battlefield. So like that information is just so valuable.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'm over here like, these are my favorite white cards, right? And the white cards are great. And I love white cards. I play White Weenie from like almost day one from playing Magic. And I was like, all right, so this card's incredible. And so Ruben's going to tell me that his top 10 are the best white cards. And somehow, some way, the man doesn't have Swords to Plowshares on his list.
I know.
How does this happen? Swords to Plowshares, 1 white mana for an uncommon instant from friggin' Alpha that says exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. I get to play it in Historic Brawl. I love it.
And that's the only place you get to play it, which is why I decided not to put it on my list.
True.
You're right. Look, it's the best white card. I think it's the best white card ever.
Maybe ever. I mean,
but I've pontificated about Swords to Plowshares before, so I wanted to give some other things a shot. But you're right. This card's amazing. There's nothing better. There's nothing that could ever replace it. It's spectacular.
Yeah. So I also didn't include it because it isn't really playable ever.
I mean, it is in Historic Brawl.
It's
like,
playable
that's not a
in
real
Historic Brawl.
Hey,
period.
I have cast many a Dark Ritual. Come on now. It's been fun. Yeah. Look, and as a man who likes Historic Brawl yourself, I
love Historic Brawl.
It sucks that this is a rare wild card or whatever, but that's what burnt me. Like, I hated it. It killed me to do so, but you do the one, you'll have it forever for all your Brawl decks, and it'll work. This is the type of incredibly powerful effect that I expect that if Wizards were to one day finally say this is just historic legal, that Lightning Bolt would also become historic legal on the same day.
They're never going to put this in historic. They're just period. And if
did you just never a Magic thing?
Never will they put Swords to Plowshares into a constructed format on Arena that isn't Historic Brawl.
I don't know that I agree, only because as time goes on and the pools get deeper and deeper, things get crazier, right? Like, so
I don't give the nevers. I'll give the very long periods of time. I'll say the next 5 years, 10 years. But I can't give the nevers anymore on Wizards. They do crazy
10
stuff.
years from now or whatever, Historic is going to be freaking, massive compared to what it is now. So like I could see them being able to support crazier cards just because things got crazy.
We were this close to Brainstorm along with, Delver right there.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. All right. So let's move on here to number 7. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 and 6 are both higher on other people's lists.
Well, okay. Then Nerd Girl, what's your number 7?
So my number 7, so I've been up till this point currently doing things that are relevant in either historic or standard, some of the more competitive rankier formats. But a couple of my picks are things that were very impactful at the time and maybe have kind of faded out because they didn't transfer into historic, but a card that I really enjoyed and made a format for me was Veteran Loxodon. This is a 4 mana and a white Elephant Cleric. It is a 4/4 with Convoke, so you can tap creatures to help pay for the mana cost. Each creature tapped is 1 colorless, and when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that was used to convoke it. So this was a huge part of the go wide white strategy that I was seeing a ton of, like when I went to the Invitational, and I did a ton of testing with it. This was actually one of the few times I didn't really play much white because I never know when to attack and when to convoke these things. So it was actually kind of an interesting one that I struggled with. So I thought it would be a good one to put on the list.
Oh, this card's amazing.
I love this card so much. I played a ton of this card too. Yeah. There's nothing that makes my heart warmer than going turn 1 1-drop, turn 2 2-drop, turn 3 3 1-drops, Loxodon. And that's it. That's the game. There was like 6 months where the best thing you could be doing was just playing History of Benellia's and Legion's Landings, and
it was great.
And this card,
I loved it.
Yeah, it was wild. It was a wild time where it was like, man, white cards are bad except for this deck, which beats everything.
Yes.
And yeah, there was a pro tour where like 7 of the top 8 were Benelish Marshall decks. It was wild. What a wild time.
That's terrific. Look, Venerated Loxodon is just kind of that perfect, one of those perfect creatures that it's in its format, in its day, in its standard. It's one of the coolest, best things you could be doing. As soon as it leaves standard, we're not going to see much more. We'll see you in the casual tables. You'll make some cool EDH decks. That's nice. That's awesome. It's not going to mess up any constructed formats. It's done what it needed to do. It impacted what it needed to impact. It showed the power of Convoke. It made it Convoke like in a different but really powerful way. Like, oh, it was fantastic.
Was there any other Convoke card that really got any like major play?
Well,
this is the main one that jumps out to me.
This is the main one from that format.
Right.
I mean,
Conclave Tribunal was a big one.
Yeah.
March of the Multitudes.
You're right. Those did see play. I was thinking more like Court of Calling way back in the day.
I wish Court of Calling was on Arena.
Well,
it is
let's not kid ourselves. But I think that, well, the other thing that's interesting about Venerated Loxodon is that it's the only card that, instead of simply asking you to pay it with Convoke, it gives you a benefit for convoking it.
Right, yes. For each one.
Which is a totally unique effect. We've never seen that before or since. And I think that's a huge area for exploration when they bring Convoke back.
Yeah, they recently brought Return to the Ranks into Arena, and I don't have it on my list, and I don't think you guys do either, but Return to the Ranks is stupidly powerful in the zombie deck when you bring back 5 zombies and you get a bajillion triggers and you just die. I've done that before, but yeah, Convoke is really sweet, and that's a very unique Convo card. All right, so, gather round, children. We're back to the same story I've already told you, which is Ruben decided to have the best white cards of all time. He sets up this narrative. I didn't say anything. He brought it out there. Therefore, I get to from the top rope. All right. So he says to me, he said, it's best white cards. I'm like, you know what? Okay. Swords and Plowshares. It's not illegal. I get it. I understand.
Okay.
The man leaves off Wrath of God. Wrath of God is my number 7. You want to talk about the quintessential. You want to talk about the old school, like bringing it to the point where you're like, what is a magic card? What is a white magic card? What's a powerful white magic card? Like, this is like, it's fun to me because, I feel like every magic player goes through that initial, like, why is this card good? And I love that part, just sort of like as a developing player, you need to ask that question. You need to ask that question, like, whether you figure it out on day 1 because you're super smart, or you figure it out on month 3 because it takes a minute. Everyone has to figure out why Wrath of God is dope. Wrath of God is 2 white and 2 generic mana for a rare sorcery that destroys all creatures and they can't be regenerated. And yes, it destroys yours, but when they have more than yours, you win. When they have bunches and you have 0, you win. And that just kind of extrapolates from there. And so, yeah, it's one of the best white cards ever. That's a Wrath of God.
I mean, you're right. It is. And at this point, I can only apologize. Look, do you want my entire list to be Doomscars and Fumigates and
I figured if you were going to pick a Wrath, right?
Well, if I'm going to pick a Wrath, I could pick a Wrath. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Whatever. I mean, I've talked about Wrath of God so many times before.
Fine, obviously.
This is another one where I've talked, I love Wrath of God, especially in college. I had the Portal cartoony Wraths.
Oh yeah, with the bud on it. Yeah,
with the bud on it. Yeah, those were my favorite.
Those were neat.
There's also something to say about, like, I feel like the top 10s are a little less interesting if it's the side staple stuff that's in every single thing. Like, yeah, Swords is good, Wrath is good, but they're not very exciting. They're not the build around pieces. It's not what the deck does.
Right.
And I like those things a little bit more. I think it's interesting to talk about because they actually define what the deck is going to be doing.
Fair enough. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on here to number 6. I'll give you a card to build around. I'll give you a card that's excited and sweet and worth a bunch of money, and people are really excited about it. And it's affected Magic from the moment it showed up. It affected non-Magic, but also cosplayers. It affected the ability for us to see what was possible in terms of Magic. By God, I love me an Elish Norn. Grand Cenobite. 2 white, 5 generic mana for a 4/7 mythic legendary Praetor. Legendary Phyrexian Praetor. Put some respect on that name. Vigilance, of course, and other creatures you control get +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. This has been fun ever since it showed up. I've been playing multiple Reanimator decks with it in there, and people just love to scoop to an Elish Norn.
Oh yeah, this card's a beating. This card's absurd. This is a 4/7 for 7 mana. So it was my number 7. This card has been a beating the whole gosh darn time. It is absurd. I've played so many games where I'm like, well, can't lose. Oh, well, guess I died. And done the same thing on the other side. It's one of the premier reanimation targets in the Mardu Reanimator deck in Historic. It's great. There's not much else can be said about it.
Yeah, I love this card. I got to do very well in a limited GP in one of the Modern Masters ones with this. It's also one of, for many years, my dream card of owning. I wanted the Phyrexian Altar for this card, and I very recently got one in that Secret Lair thing.
Very nice.
They gave us those Secret Lair packages.
Yeah, super
and it actually came with all of the Phyrexian
the
things
Praetors,
in alternate, which was really cool. I love this card. I don't actually know why it didn't make my life. I don't really do other formats, I guess. But this is a really fun card.
Look, ultimately, for me, the biggest win here is the fact that they went back and they put Phyrexian as a creature type on all of those old cards.
Yeah.
Like, there was just so many conversations where I just felt like, I was like, why are you not making this a Phyrexian horror or whatever? Right. And they were just like, well, it doesn't need it. And we'll, like, we'll show it through the cards and the names and the flavors. And I'm like, no, dude. Like,
but now we got it.
We got it now. It's a Phyrexian Praetor. That's awesome. And moving into the Brothers War next year and Dominaria United, it's going to be absolutely terrific. I'm excited.
And by the way, this card was a beating in Standard. I remember sacrificing many an Inferno Titan to my birthing pod to go get an Elish Norn and cleaning up a game. And man, this card was as good as it is in old formats. It was even better in Standard.
Yeah, it was enter the scoop phase when this thing resolved. Nerd Girl, what's your number 6?
So my number 6 is a small, cute card that is going to enable a lot of decks that might just get like, if you have one centerpiece that needs to be removed, this is the card that you need to help make your deck work. And that is Selfless Savior. Ooh. It's a little 1/1 for 1 white mana. It's a dog. And you can sacrifice it. So it doesn't cost any mana, so you can do it the turn that it comes out. Doesn't tap or anything. Another target creature you control gains indestructible till end of turn. I'm also going to read the flavor text because I think it is very important. She raised him from an orphan pup and gave him a life of love. With his last act, he thanked her.
But.
F.
He's the best boy. F's in the chat.
He is the bestest of boys, and a card I played a lot of in Standard, and he's super cute. He's like, his tongue is hanging out. The art's amazing. Flavor text. This card is awesome.
The flavor text says one thing and the gameplay says another, because all I ever see is Luris bringing this thing back over and over and over again.
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It does protect the cat a bit much. But yeah, this card's insane. I mean, a way that you can invest on the board early to protect something that comes down later is huge.
Yeah.
We have had Dauntless Bodyguard in the past. We've had Alseid of Life's Bounty, which kind of does something similar-ish, but cost mana. This is a unique card in terms of what it's able to do and enable in terms of gameplay. In addition to the fact that it is adorable and heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You see it in spell form, right? The 1 mana protection from color spell. So this is a way for like aggressive decks to still continue to be aggressive, but still have access to those protection things that they need later on for like auras or whatever.
Right, but now it's a doggy.
And it's so cute.
It's a doggy boy. Oh my gosh. Let's move on to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
Another thing that this does is it provides you with a pip on the board, just in case you're looking for extra white devotion, which you might be in the market for if you are interested in my number 5, which is Heliod Suncrown. Heliod Suncrown is 2 generic and a white mana for a legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible. He's a 5/5. But as long as your devotion to white is less than 5, Heliod isn't a creature. That's okay, though, because whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or enchantment you control, and it has an activated ability of a generic and a white. Another target creature gains lifelink until the end of the turn. This card has kicked my ass so many times. I can never, not to mention the fact that there is a bunch of combos that you can do with Heliod in a variety of formats. Historic has the Scurry Oak Soul Warden combo, which allows you to make an arbitrarily large number of squirrels and an arbitrarily large Scurry Oak. in Modern and other formats, you have Duskwatch Recruiter to go get your Walking Ballista, and when you give your Walking Ballista lifelink, you can ping Machine Gun with it. Or you can just die to a 5/5. This card is a 3-mana 5/5 in much the same way that Thassa, God of the Sea was, and you saw how good that was when it was in Standard as well.
I'm fairly confident they really, really, really wanted Heliod to be the best god this time. It's just head and shoulders among the rest. The Thassa is really interesting, and I've had a lot of fun with it in casual formats, blinking creatures. But man, like the instant it shows up, if it's gain life and you're doing triggers, multiple gain life triggers are just nuts. The gain life deck in Historic is unbelievably overbearing sometimes. And yeah, this card's just everywhere.
Yep, I like playing it a lot in Standard. I haven't played that deck in Historic, but it's definitely a huge thing that made white playable, which is what we were talking about with like the Elite Spellbinder in its time, and I always love those cards.
Yeah, and it's one of those things sort of on the macro level that's hard to figure out and hard to judge. You know, there's definitely been eras of Magic where green sucked. I know it's weird. I know we don't live that era anymore, but there was a whole 5 to 8 years where green was just
I was going to say more like 10 years where green was just bad.
Very long stretch. Every once in a while you'd have a mono green aggro deck show up, but it was pretty trash. And white was very similar until we got the Oblivion rings that kind of started things off back in lore when white was pretty terrible. So, you know, it ebbs and it flows. Sometimes Wizards makes mono black the best, and when you have Gray Merchant and you got Pack Rat, they give you Thoughtseize back in Standard. And sometimes they give you crazy stuff like this God, and it's taken over Standard that way. Nerd Girl, what's your number 5?
So my number 5 is a card that has been on Arena for a little while, but wasn't seeing a lot of play until recently, and that is Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
Yeah.
It is a white and a colorless for a legendary human soldier. It has first strike, and non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. So it's just really cute with any like creature deck that wants to punish your opponent, make them play a little off tempo, and helps you beat them to the punch before they can do any sort of like removal or board clears or anything.
Yeah, an incredible secret lair version that they have of
multiple secret lair versions. Yeah. And for good reason, because I think Thalia might be the best white 2-drop. I think it might be better than Stoneforge Mystic. Better than, I mean, for what it is, for what it is designed to do. I mean, Stoneforge Mystic is much more
Stoneforge Mystic's kind of busted, but
it's also a product of other cards that can be printed later.
Sure.
Right? So there's a bunch of things. In any case, that's not the argument here.
Point is, a very powerful
it's
card.
in the argument of being one of, if not the best. And it is helping an entire archetype that up to this point was starved for cards. Before Thalia was printed in the original Innistrad, we were playing Glow Rider and we were liking it. Glow Rider had the same stats, didn't have first strike, and cost 3.
Yeah.
And that card was still good enough. So you take a mana, you make it cost less and give it first strike? I mean, this is the Hate Bear that began a whole era of a Hate Bear supremacy.
Yeah, I mean, this card got to show you the power of a 2-drop with a really disruptive ability. This is, like, I love when white is disruptive in this way. Like, it's not overpower. A 2/1's not going to end the game, but a 2/1 that keeps you from, like, being on your curve and hitting the spells you want, and it's just enough to make you have to wait an extra turn, and then they put something else, and then, then they use the Force Spike or whatever, the Mana Tithe you. Like, there's a whole bunch of ways that white can just kind of sneak up on you, and Thalia is really terrific at doing that. All right, so while we're in Thraben, while we're discussing the Thrabenistas, as it were, I'm all about that Thraben life.
I'm upset by Thrabenista.
Oh yeah. Thraben Boo. Here we go. Thraben Inspector is my pick because, like, just as an amazing card, it's really fantastic. It's really it always just blown my mind. I don't know why, but for some reason, ever since it showed up, I was just like, man, giving white an extra permanent, a non-land permanent, and the ability to draw a card, and it's a 1-mana 1/2. It doesn't seem like it's enough, but it's always enough. It's always super good. It's showing up in a ton of decks. It's in a huge amount of any deck that has white in it when I play Historic Brawl, because it's always great and fun on turn 1. And yeah, Thraben Inspector is just terrific value. That's all it does.
Yeah. I mean, I think that any 1-mana spell that produces any token is good. I think that I would play any Gilded Goose, Hard Evidence, Thraben Inspector.
I was going to say Hard Evidence is a great example.
More. Yeah, I'm sure there are more, but like such ticky-tack value, right? Like a clue is fine. It's good, especially in white when we're so starved for card draw.
Right.
A 1/2 for 1 is fine. It's not spectacular by any means, but when you put them together, it's exactly the glue that can hold one of the more powerful archetypes in standard, modern, and historic together.
Well, I think anytime you're splitting the power of a card, in this case, it's, replacement of itself. You have to pay for it, to be fair, but it enables like a sacrifice theme. It helps you with going wide if you're like the go wide aggressive with like pumps and things, which oftentimes those decks tend to run out of gas. So you're getting a body. I mean, you're just getting this weird sort of split power, which gives you a huge discount and enables so many different strategies.
Yeah, this is a card that like it's been fantastic since like day one. It's weird. Like I'm glad Wizards hasn't sort of gone beyond Thraben Inspector, because they'll just reprint it. They're like, oh, it's still great.
You ever sacrifice a Thraben Inspector clue token to a tinker in the cube? Boy, I have, and it's great.
That's a good clean living right there.
That's amazing.
All right, let's move on here to number 4. Now look, if we're going to talk about the Thrabens, the Thrabenistas, as it were, if we're going to talk about the Thalias being the guardian of said Thraben, if we're going to talk about Thalia being awesome, well, we can't just sit around and talk about Thalia and not talk about her lieutenant in number 4, which is Thalias Lieutenant, which recently showed up in Jumpstart Historic Horizons, and mother of God, this thing is powerful. It's a white and generic mana for a 1/1 rare human soldier that says when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control, and whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Thalias Lieutenant, and you go wide like nobody's business, and suddenly your Thalia is a 3/2 first strike, and all of your humans are super huge, and it works great with stuff like Proliferate, and it's great in the humans decks, and it's great in your casual decks, and Thalias Lieutenant is a fantastic addition, just full stop.
Yeah, I think it's good enough to where it's going to see a ton of play, but it's not, I don't think, taking over any formats and making things like unbearable. These are the kind of cards I like to play for sure.
And even in the formats where humans were the best thing, like Bant humans in Standard, 5-color humans in Modern, Thalias Lieutenant was the glue that kind of held it all together and made things great, but it was never like, this is the problem, right? Yeah. Like, we gotta ban Thalias Lieutenant because it's the card. It was never that. It was just a solid all-star that was always, the third best card in whatever deck that it was in. And that's awesome. That's a perfectly designed card.
Yeah, between this and Gavany Township, it just like huge sweeps.
I've noticed that we're starting to say exactly what you just said a lot for all of the white cards, because we said the exact same thing about the Elite Spellbinder last week. It's that like even when white is at the table and can compete, it's never the thing that people are upset about. So it's never overly powerful, but these cards really enable them to become players. And I think that's really neat, that I feel like their white balance when they hit it is still pretty good.
The best games of Magic, in my opinion, are games in which there's really complicated combat. And boy, are Thalias Lieutenant games complicated combat, right? You're putting 1 million counters on 1 million permanents that are already small, but you've changed the math, and then a bunch of random other stuff is going to happen after the card is in play, not to mention if you've got Collected Company happening, and all this is happening at instant speed. And so it leads to really fun, interesting games. Even when you lose and it doesn't feel great, you're like, well, at least the game was weird.
Yeah, at least stuff happened, as it were. Ruben, what's number 4?
Number 4 is, I left a bunch of those like all-time all-stars off my list, but I really wanted to talk about Teferi's Protection because I don't think I've ever really talked about it before.
All right.
And I just love this card exists. Teferi's Protection is 2 generic and a white for an instant. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. Exile Teferi's Protection. Wow. Every sentence on this card is bonkers. For 3 mana and instant speed, it's Wrath Protection, it's Combo Protection, it's Discard Protection. It does like so many weird different things, and I get to play it in Historic Brawl. It's my one Historic Brawl card that I put on my list.
Nice. This is a card that, like, I didn't believe this. I just forgotten this had been put on Arena. I was looking up, like, lists and stuff, like, in Arena, and it was like, Teferi's Protection. I'm like, that's not in Arena. Literally opened up Arena, and I was like, oh my god, I have 2 copies. That's weird. Because Teferi's Protection is a fantastic Magic card. It's worth $25+ no matter which way you basically find it. And it's an incredible mythic, and it's an incredibly powerful card, and you gain protection from literally everything. It saves everything. It's really thematic, which is awesome at the same time. So super powerful, super thematic, very playable, excellent Magic card.
I played an EDH game very recently where I had 2 mana available, and they wrathed me, and I had this card, and I'm very sad about it.
No.
Yeah. It's my own fault. I had my own wrath. And this, and I was like, all right, next turn I can, like, flip all my things away and then wrath everybody at the EDH table. And it's like, all right, so I'm going to play some stuff so that way I have really big stuff and we'll do the thing. And then somebody else wrathed, and I was just like, oops.
Darn.
It's awesome that you have both. Like, you do have a secret lair drop, which is great. That's from the Black is Magic one. And you also have the Strixhaven Mystical Archive Japanese version, which looks unbelievable. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah. And if I had one in paper, that would be the one I would want.
Yeah. And the English Mystical Archive one is no slouch either. It displays Teferi casting the spell that removed Zalfir from the plane of Dominaria when the planar portals were arriving.
Right.
So, it's actually, it's also stylized, and it's low detail because it's a little tiny Magic card. But if you look up close, it's got huge amounts of artistic license included in it.
Absolutely. All right. Miss Nerd Girl, what's number 4?
So my number 4 is a little less relevant now, and it makes me very sad, but this is one of my favorite all-time white cards on Arena. It's also one of my all-time favorite arts, period. And that is History of Benellia.
Hey, there it is.
This is a saga for colorless white, and when it enters the battlefield, the first chapter and second chapters make a 2/2 white knight with vigilance. And then chapter 3 is all of your knights get +2/+1 until end of turn. This is a card I love to play and had a blast doing constructed, which coming from me is very difficult for me to say. But like when I saw this, the jumbo card at an event, man, oh man, did I have to have it.
Yeah, never forget that this was originally spoiled without a rarity and was put up for pre-order as an uncommon for 25 cents.
Yep.
This thing,
whoa!
Oh yeah, this thing later went to. They had to reject all its pre-orders, obviously. Later,
oh my god!
Like a $15 to $20 card when it was in standard because it was a 4 of and all the best decks. This was a card that really showcased the power of sagas as they showed up for the first time in Dominaria. And yeah, it's hard to say anything wrong about this thing. It's gorgeous and it's powerful and it's great and it was awesome.
It's sticky. It sticks to the board, and that's a big problem that white decks have and had during the previous to this card existing in standard.
Yeah, you
can wrath, and then this thing still has value. And the other thing is, a lot of sagas have like a dud chapter. You know what I mean? Like, there's I don't really care about. My creatures gain depth
2
touch,
or whatever.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, who cares about whatever's happening? There's no dud chapters here. If you're playing the game right, you're getting value at every chapter. And for 3 mana, you get 8 power in a couple turns, then 4 power for the rest of the game. That can attack and block
over
this
multiple bodies. Yeah, and History of Benellia into another History of Benellia was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I was going to say that they stack also very well, which is just nuts.
Very, very, very well. So let's move on here to my number 3. Now, if we're talking about History of Benellia and we're talking about how cool it is, that this is powerful and this is sweet and this is awesome, like, what would you rather do than make 1 night token? Why don't you make 2 of them? Why don't we double it up with Anointed Procession? This card is $31 freaking in paper right now. Ridiculous. Wow. But it's also in Amonkhet Remastered, which was great. Anointed Procession is a white and 3 generic mana for a rare enchantment that says if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice as many of those tokens instead. This is for clues. This is for foods. This is for all the creature tokens that are awesome. And this is a super fun card that I'm very afraid to let my opponent untap with because it usually means I lose a couple turns after.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a white parallel lives, and basically, here's the moral of the story. If it says twice as many, or double, or something like that on it, just buy a million of them and put them in your closet.
Yep.
And now we're getting things like fiery emancipation that say triple. So that, so
there will come a time,
put those in a box.
Yeah, there's going to be a 7-mana version of this that makes triple the tokens. That's going to be worth $1 million.
Perfect.
Just you wait. All right. Let's move on here to Nerd Girls number 3. What you got?
So my number 3 is... I gave it the number 3 spot because I really like that it is good against control decks, against the board clears, and against other things, which is something white usually really struggles with. And that is the Danto Vanguard.
There you go.
For a colorless white, it is a vampire soldier. It is a 1/1, and as long as it is attacking, it gets +2/+0. And you can pay 4 life, and it gains indestructible. And 4 life doesn't matter when you are playing against the control players, because they're going to kill you much, much later. So you can dump, all your life into this, and they can't deal with it. And you get a lot of kills you wouldn't have otherwise. And I think it's really fun. 4 life is a little scarier and limited, so it's a little, not as good. But in Constructed, I thought that this was an awesome thing that white had access to.
I mean, Ixalan wasn't the most beloved set of all time, and it wasn't, it didn't sort of power up a ton of stuff, but when it was good, it was really, really good. Danto Vanguard was fantastic. It's super great when you're aggressive, and if you have to stop and block something larger than 4 power with 4 life, that's also fantastic. At any point in time, you could pay that life. There was no, if I recall correctly at least, there were no good and or used often -X/-X spells at the time. It was always destroy this or deal X damage to that, and so it had a good opportunity to live through the wraths and or live through the removal that most people were playing. So this card was just fantastic.
it blanked a lot of the removal. It ate a lot of Teferi -3 activations. It ate a lot of like seal aways and stuff like that. But you're okay with that. It's a 2-mana investment. This thing hits hard.
It does.
I love this. Things like this. Even things like Seasoned Hallowblade, which they don't really do exactly the same thing, but they survive wraths.
Right.
This card, to this day, in Historic, is a valuable piece of aggressive white decks, and it's easy to see why. It's very good at what it does.
I mean, turn to another copy of this. Like, you don't need to play anything else. You can literally just wait until they deal with your 2 Danto Vanguards, or they'll die. Like, It's nice and simple that way. All right. Let's see. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a legacy pick. Not a card that is played in Legacy. It is a pick because it gets the emeritus slot. It has deserved to get attention, and so I'm putting it on the list. Long time ago, I believe Tom Lapilli said that every standard forever should have an Oblivion Ring. And so I agree. Every standard and you should just have Banishing Light in standard forever, and it's great. It is exactly what white should be doing in terms of removal, and I'm giving it its time in the sun here. Banishing Light is on Arena a couple times. Theros Beyond Death, Kaldheim Commander stuff, etc. It's 2 colorless and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Banishing Light leaves the battlefield. These days we have Borrowed Time. As I mentioned before, we had Oblivion Ring. We've had Conclave Tribunal. We've had lots of different types of this effect. This is the cleanest version of it. And I just appreciate how solid Banishing Light is.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that, until 2007, this just wasn't in white's repertoire. It was Circles of Protection were a thing, right? And protection in general was a thing. But never could you just temporarily not do that? Could you just get rid of that thing for a while? And if you answer my thing, you get it back. But you have to answer my thing. Oblivion Ring had a bit of an awkward wording. It doesn't say your opponent's non-land permanent, so it could be your own, and you could bounce Oblivion Rings, and LSV broke, MTGO that one time, and wasn't great. But ultimately, the idea of the Oblivion Ring was absolutely fantastic, and to see it's kind of sort of its new modern version, they're making new, different, mechanically equivalent versions, which I think is great, because that's great for Brawl decks and all your EDH decks. And so, bring it on. Have this ability all the time. Have it help define what white does. Give me more of stuff like this. Let's go. We're fiend hunters.
Started putting it on a lot of white creatures and things, which is really helpful. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, like, even from a limited perspective, without some sort of ability like this, white is going to be just unplayable. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't exactly remember what limited was like, and I don't know how much I was playing back then. Mostly kitchen table stuff. So without something like this, I would be scared to see what white would look like in limited. So I'm always very glad to have this. And we don't have a lot of premium removal. Like right now, it is just a reprint of Borrowed Time, right? For the Innistrad, yeah.
Functionally, mechanically identical, yeah.
Yeah, we get the almost exact same card reprinted with different names sometimes, which is really just, it shows you how important this is for a format.
But I tell you, the card that always, like, I don't understand why. I'm sure there's a very good reason, but it kills me that Wizards to this day has not reprinted Journey to Nowhere back into Standard or Modern or whatever. Journey to Nowhere, for those who don't know, is a white and a generic mana for a common enchantment from Zendikar that says when it enters the battlefield, you exile target creature, and when it leaves the battlefield, you return the creature to its owner's control. So, like, it's Oblivion Ring for creatures. They've made Seal Away, which exiles tap creatures and whatnot. They've made Cast Out, which is also very similar, but just never as clean and as powerful as Journey to Nowhere. It still kills
they did Glass Casket also.
Portable Hole is in there, but like...
Yep. I think Journey to Nowhere is a little bit of a bridge too far. It's a little too cheap.
It's super
a little too universal.
Yeah.
It's a little too good.
But I like good cards.
I mean, I do too. And if we're going to put Swords to Plowshares in Historic, we can certainly get Journey to Nowhere in Standard.
I would be okay with Journey, no swords. I'd be totally okay with that. Let's move on.
I think Journey's good for Historic. I think that's a card they could put into a future Historic Horizons.
I think it'd be great. Let's move on here to our number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
Well, my number 2 is a 2-mana enchantment, colorless and a white. That is the best at what it does, and it's Rest in Peace.
Yeah.
Colorless and a white enchantment. When Rest in Peace enters the battlefield, exile all cards from all graveyards. If a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead.
Definitely a key piece in sideboards for all white decks in competitive play, right?
Yeah. This is one of those cards that, like, ultimately you're glad it exists. I appreciate the fact that it's here. It's good. It's powerful. It's one of those, like, stopgaps that you need in a game like Magic to say, you know what, we can make very powerful graveyard effects as long as something like Rest in Peace exists in that format. Because it keeps a little, keeps the rain on it. You don't want to print your Shatter Storms after, Affinity's already destroyed your format. Like, that's a bad idea.
I think it's possible that I'm not saying that this is a thing that you can do, but I would wager that if you took the 75s that have top 8'd every major Magic tournament since 10 years, let's say, since this was first printed, this might be the most played card in the older formats, in Modern, Pioneer, and Legacy and Vintage. I think that this one might be, if you were to just say, is Rest in Peace in this deck? Yes. Is it in this deck? No. I think if you were to tally those up, I bet this is the most common white card out of all of those cards.
Now that you're putting more, not number of copies and also only white out of the white decks. Yes, that does make sense that this is going to be, because like I said, it's going to be a staple in almost every single one because it's something you are going to need access to. When it comes to like Modern and stuff, like my old Modern deck was Dredgevine. So like this is something that is kind of nice to just always have. And there's a ton of different decks that it can target.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that, like, I don't want it out, like, I don't want it outclassed. This is fine for me. I'm happy with what it does. I'm happy with the power level. It doesn't need to draw me a card when it enters the battlefield. It doesn't even have hexproof or something. Like, It's good. It's sweet. You can answer it, but it should be very powerful when you play it. And that's what I like about it. Nerd Girl, what's number 2?
So my number 2 is a card that has seen a lot of play in a ton of different decks. It saw a ton of play when, it was in Standard. It's still seeing some play. It has some EDH implications, and it's just not something that we're going to have go away anytime soon. And that is Kenrith the Returned King. This is a 4 colorless and a white for a legendary human noble with a lot of abilities. For 1 red, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. For a colorless and a green, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. For 2 colorless and a white, target player gains 5 life. For 3 colorless and a blue, target player draws a card. And for 4 and a black, return target card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under its control. From a graveyard, onto the battlefield under its owner's control. Right. So the reason that this made my list is because it was a terror with the Fires of Invention deck. It was also something you could hit with the Winona deck. Winona, whatever, I always say that name wrong.
Yep.
So it's just something that has came up a lot, and it is like this huge powerhouse. And the fact that for 1 red, it gives it and everything else haste, it's so difficult to deal with. And once they do this, I feel like a lot of times, especially in Standard, you could not win the game anymore.
This was when they, and correct me if I'm wrong here, this was the first, or one of the first, okay, there was the red-white guys, but this was one of the first buy-a-box promos that you can only get via buy-a-box that was like, oh my god, this thing is really powerful / constructed playable. And people were kind of flipping out about it because, this also kind of signaled that Throne of Eldraine was not going to be your average, run-of-the-mill, this is okay, but it's not crazy type set. No, all these abilities are nuts. This is one of the most powerful commanders I think they've made in a very long time. It kind of just does everything. It's the perfect way to sink your mana into. It was busted with a bunch of cards. Like, it's exciting top to bottom. This is the type of card that just has no downside. There's not one here. It just kind of does all the things.
Yeah.
A 5-color commander as well, like, because of the color identity without having to have the mana restrictions of casting something for Wooburg or whatever. It's a lot.
Yeah. Now that Golos is banned in Commander, this is the 5-color commander go-to that doesn't really ask a lot of you in terms of getting mana before putting it into play. Got its time in the sun in Standard, particularly in those Fires of Invention decks. 5 for 5. It's a big white human, so you could put it in those Winota decks, as you mentioned. Yep. We had just gotten away from Nexus of Fate when we got this as the buy-a-box promo, so we were a little gun-shy on buy-a-box promos, and clearly this one was powerful, but it's fun, it's interesting, it's cool, it's a 5-mana creature. How great can it be? So ultimately, I'm okay with Kenrith.
Right. This is one of the cards that, I think it pushed the envelope, but it was designed to be a very powerful casual card, and that's what it was. So good in the casual space that it bleeds over to constructed. But again, I think at this point, Wizards is like, okay, whatever. We're glad you play it in a standard deck, cool, but let's go play more Commander or whatever. But I'm okay with that. Speaking of Commander / Brawl / my number 2, this is a card that, what happens sort of these days, at least right now, particularly between sets, and I'm just like, I've drafted the hell out of Midnight Hunt. I've played lots and lots of Constructed. I've played the decks I want to play. So now I'm like, well, I'll play some Historic Brawl. And what happens is I'll try to build a Historic Brawl deck with anyone with a white color identity, and there is just 100% of the time this card shows up on EDH Rec as a card you need in your deck, and that card is Smothering Tithe. Smothering Tithe is a $30 card. This thing is going to be $50 before it's over.
So stupid.
Goodness.
$30 card right now. It's a white and 3 generic mana for a rare enchantment originally from Ravnica Allegiance. It says whenever an opponent draws a card, that a player may pay 2 generic mana. If they don't, you get a treasure token. And that's amazing. And it works every time, and it's great every time. It fuels you for your mana. It gives them like a weird feel bad during their draw step, which is kind of awesome. And if they want to draw extra cards, you're totally okay with that because they're putting you so much more ahead in mana. Like, this card is nuts. And I've played it in like almost every single one of my white Brawl decks. It's amazing.
This was my number 6.
Nice.
It's actually not that great in Brawl because it's a one-on-one format. It's really good in multiplayer format.
Yes.
I mean, the reason why it's $30 is because EDH has 4 or 5 players.
Right.
Yeah.
It's absurd. This card is absolutely bonkers insane the more opponents you have. And for 4 mana, it's fine. It's on a 1v1 situation as well. And yeah, I really love this card a lot. I mean, vomiting coins in art is going to get me regardless of what the card does.
The art is really cool. Actually, it's one of the few cards that isn't like pretty or, History of Benellia type for white, but still very striking. I think that's really cool. I do play a lot of white in Commander. That tends to be my thing, which is why I lose, because I'm not playing ramp like an idiot. But yeah, this card always sees play in any EDH deck that I tend to pick up. So
yeah. This is the type of card that Wizards makes, and they didn't realize what they didn't realize, and it just creeps. It was a $5 to $10 card when it was in print and standard, and then it kind of bumped to 15 to 20. Now we're in the 30 plus. It's going to get to 40 and 50 one day if they don't reprint it, and suddenly it's going to be a Mythic and a Masters or a Battle Bond set, because that's just what these cards do. Sure. Is they get ridiculous.
I love that. I think that putting this in a Battle Bond is a great idea.
That's the way we're trending, and I like it. All right, let's move on here to the number one. Ruben, what's your number one?
My number one is, I think, the best white creature, the best mono white creature on Arena.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. There are arguments here and there, but I'm pretty sure it's this creature. It's certainly the one that I have the most fun, that I think is the most interesting, and it's also in Standard, which is super cool, or at least was recently in Standard, and didn't really lose a ton of value when it rotated. It still sees a bunch of play in Historic. It's really good in basically every format. Skyclave Apparition.
Nice. My number 10.
Colorless white gets you a 2/2 core spirit that when it enters the battlefield, exile up to one target non-land, non-token permanent you don't control with mana value 4 or less. When Skyclave Apparition leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner makes an XX blue illusion creature token, where X is the mana value of the exiled card. So you get a couple of interesting things here, right? One is you can remove 4-drops, which means that you end up on mana. But you can also just remove whatever is hurting you, right? Your opponent played a 2/2 with haste. You can get rid of their Robber of the Rich. You can get rid of their whatever. And it does the Thought-Knot Seer thing, where it doesn't give them the card back like you do with Oblivion Ring. It gives them some crappy XX token. So who cares? It's not a Fires of Invention if it's a 4/4.
Yeah, this is a really nice tool for both white aggressive decks and white control-y decks. So, if you're in the control-y deck, what you can do is stop their aggressive thing early and then chump block later, giving them the token. And then now that you're set up a couple of turns later, you can now wrath the board. Token's not a problem anyway. Or the aggressive decks, you just want to play your, quick early things, the one that gives counters and do all this stuff. And then you just slam bodies that also remove blockers. And then that just allows you to keep your foot on the gas. I think this is a great thing for white to have for sure.
Yeah, this is my number 10 because the toolbox kind of amount of this card is huge. To be able to get rid of a 4 mana costing, get out of here Asika's Chariot, get out of here the Planeswalker that you have, get out of here the equipment that you got, get out of here the other, Oblivion Ring-esque effect across the board, your Banishing Light or whatever. And again, to get rid of it forever, generally what we've seen is white gets rid of it temporarily. But no, it's gone forever and ever. That's a really cool Heliod you had there. You can get rid of it. I'll give you a 3/3 if you answer this little 2/2 guy, but you're never getting that thing back. And that is it's just huge and absolutely fantastic card.
Yeah, Definitely. when you're up against a Teferi Time Raveler and you have a brutal Cathar or whatever, or a Borrowed Time, right? And it's just I'm kind of sad because they're getting their tempo back. With this, you kind of want them to give you your Skyclave Apparition back, even though they get a 3/3, because now you just get to get rid of their Teferi or their other thing that they've played since then.
Yeah, just good old-fashioned exile the thing. It never comes back. Yeah, you'll get a little value later, but I'm totally okay with that. Absolutely fantastic. Nerd Girl, what's your number one?
So my number one is card, fortunately, is no longer relevant. But I wanted to put it on my list because I have never had a card give me PTSD before. To this day, it doesn't matter what format, even if that format is limited, before I hit the attack all button, I still think of this stupid card. This card is traumatizing, and that is Settle the Wreckage. For 2 white, exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search their library for that many basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle their library. I'm not kidding. Yesterday, before attacking all, this card ran through my head and did a mental check of whether or not I needed to hit the all button. Mm-hmm. And That's never happened with any card. Can you guys think of any card that has, like, actually traumatized your gameplay for forever?
Other than Counterspell, leaving up 2 blue mana, no card lives in my head rent-free.
Rent-free.
100%. More than Settle the Wreckage, for sure.
Look, you can call me the villain, all right? But I'm telling you, the pen trick for Arena is to say good game when they have 8 million creatures and you've got none, and you're sitting there with a settle, and then here they get, like, they're just smacking the button like you do, and then you settle, and you turn it around, and you win that game, and you have an amazing story, and I've done that multiple times, and I love it every single time, and I don't care. I'm the bad guy.
The Settle the Wreckage is just such a beating. I mean, it's so absurd. Like, if I had another Wrath on my list, it 100% was going to be Settle the Wreckage. Because I saw this and was like, oh my god, this is... Just every Settle the Wreckage story is also just this huge haymaker moment that is like...
Yeah.
You know,
now, if you really, like, I've been there when you're like, okay, they have a settle, right? They got the settle. It's fine. You smash them with 2 creatures and not 7. They have the settle. Okay. It's the second settle that'll just tilt you off the moon. Just
Look,
like they couldn't have had the second settle. They had the second settle.
Yeah, you got to make them have it, right? Like,
you have to make them have it. Look, for my number one white card on Arena, I feel like there's 2 worlds of Arena. And this is not just for those who like to play competitive or casual. This is for everybody who plays on both sides of that coin. There's a time in Arena before Soul Warden was added to the client, and there's a time after Soul Warden was added to the client. There is nothing a casual player likes more than life gain. It just is a thing. They love it. They like mill a lot, but life gain is easy. Life gain is cheap. There's a ton of life gain creatures. Soul Warden showed up in Historic Anthology 1, like the first one, and just blew up. And between that, like, it literally changed the card of Johnny's Pridemate to work differently because the interaction happened so many times. This card with Heliod is just a huge, ridiculous beating, and I can't stand it, and I hate it. And it's got that weird wording from back in the Tempest days because it affects both of y'all. When no other card does that these days, which is also super annoying because you totally forget about it and you play your card and you see the thing pop up and then their Pridemate gets whatever and their Heliod gets to put a counter somewhere else and you totally forgotten about that, and it drives me completely insane. And whether you hardcore constructed, hardcore casual, you do not love a Soul Warden.
Yeah.
Breathe, Evan. Breathe. It's okay. Yeah. We're here for you. This is a safe space.
That was a impassioned defense to have Soul Warden on as your number one. I mean, it's the most compelling argument there for me is actually rewording of a Johnny's Pridemate. It's the only card that has existed before that was errated on Magic Online or Magic Arena.
Yeah.
So it has literally changed the program. It's an extremely powerful card. It's really good in, those Righteous Valkyrie decks. Yeah, I mean, I'm not offended by I'm surprised that this is your number one.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
I just, I've played Arena a long time, ever since the beta, whatever, I got to squeeze into. And I'm telling you, man, the day this thing hit the client, it was just different from there on out. And the fact that you try to catch up to these types of decks by playing your own creatures, which triggers their Soul Wardens.
Yeah.
The card drives me insane. And that's why it's my number one, because I run into it constantly. It's absolutely constantly.
Nice.
All right. And that was our top 10 white cards on Arena. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
Hey, thanks.
Move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AltarSleeves.com, my co-host, Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mics, on Twitter at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.